Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Fake Accents Unite, featuring myself and the Britisher. We're back! Welcome! It's been... I prefer Attenborough to Clarkson. Probably more... Power! Welcome to the audience. It's lovely to see all of the regulars here. We've been... How long has it been? It must have been 3 weeks, I think, because we took New Year's off. And then the last 2 weeks, events have just conspired, and all sorts of horrible things have happened on my end. I don't know about the Bridge Show, who's been probably quite relieved, actually. But no, it's just the way of the world, and unfortunately, I've not been able to bring anything. I felt terribly guilty, but hopefully, things will pick up, and we shall be back every week, and everything shall really be picking up, and I'm hoping to. But I can't speak to the specifics of that as we go along. Obviously, a lot has happened. We spoke to you last. I don't know particularly. No. Oh yes, you'll notice that this is the glorious thing. When Fake Accents Unite doesn't run, nothing happens. And so, and so obviously, there we go. Apparently, people can only hear me. Speak again, Britisher, for me. Bear, bear with. I can hear you, but others cannot. Speak again. I need you. Apparently not. Okay, right. Let's just reset to this. Reset.
I suspect that the audience will think that this stream is much improved.
Behold. Apparently, OBS decided that the only way that I could get you heard was to switch you from default to a muted driver, and then back to default, and then it would work.
Well, there you go.
I am very crackly, apparently. Do I sound crackly to you?
But once in a while you crackle.
Things that Britisher should have told me whilst we were off air.
Well, we had the choice of the odd crackle now and again, or you sitting on the other side of a room, if you recall, because that's where we started.
Yeah, crap, Mike. I'm very low. I can move the microphone closer to my face.
That is better.
It is better, is it? Oh, good.
Mm-hmm.
And Britisher, you're still too loud. I've got you at -8 decibels. Turn you down even. There we go. The quieter you are, the happier the is. But there we are. Right. Apparently, we are back on form. It has been 3 weeks since last, as I was just saying. Britisher was chiming in with classic banter, as the Britisher does. In fact, some of your best lines really were
Yes, the best stuff I've ever actually produced, and and obviously nobody heard it.
Uttered in the last 45 seconds.
So I might as well leave.
So don't leave. Not with the. I'm kidding, of course. But the as I was saying, we can barely hear you, Mark. This is quite frustrating because obviously I am transmitting. It is going up to the appropriate volume here, so I don't know what's different about it, really. And there's not much I can do to the damn thing. Rolled all the way to the top. The volume is where it is. Going on. Anyway, welcome to Fake Accents. Very irritated with. Sure, I'll have a listen. of this later on and be incredibly frustrated. Oh, the chat. Can't hear Mark at all. Apparently, we are transmitting, right?
Well, I mean, I just, I live in hope that they at least pick this up as being a conversation and not just a
Right.
monologue of yours.
No. Well, people can hear you apparently, and you're appropriately voiced. But I'm not going to speak any louder, otherwise I'll be shouting. But
Well, I mean, I can always try moving a bit away from the microphone, and hopefully we'll be at sort of similar levels.
apparently
Does this work?
I keep cutting in and out apparently, right? I don't have a noise gate on, as far as I'm aware. No, I don't. So this one, no, nothing virtual there.
I've just seen your background screen for this particular episode of Fake Accents United.
You know, joy. Oh, for goodness sake! Right. Fixing Boomer Audio Edition. If right, I'm going to reverse these again and see if that. Can you not? Um. Oh yeah. Right. Okay. Please excuse. I. Hopefully that does some stuff, and then I have a VS2X plugin, which I'm also going to remove. Hopefully, we're a bit more volume. It's been 8 minutes. We've been doing this for 8 minutes, for goodness sake. Right. Properties.
Well, I mean, we had to come on because if we had not come on in order to then prepare the microphone and whatever on air, Sutzkoen would have been angry with us for being late.
Siskoen's always angry with us. Not that he appears to
So
be
you see,
here.
in fact, ladies and gentlemen, it's all Sutzkoen's fault. I'm glad we've cleared this up.
Of course, it's all Siskoen's fault. It always is. Apparently, it's better. It's better now. A bit better. There we go. Yes, this is my new PC, such that new it is, right? But there we go. I need to tell my maid to dust off the cables and the microphone more often. These things gather dust. Yeah, so they have been a bit dusty for about 3 weeks, so that's good. It's consistent now, but low. There's not much. I do apologize. We do try and solve these things, but definitely better. Hopefully, now it's just like a third of the usual volume. Okay, I will have to endeavour, because obviously according to my outputs, everything's fine. So I will need to sort things out. Sounds like I need a pop filter. Well, it's just a headset mic. So there you go. You still can't hear anything, can you, Tragic Vision? I suspect that's probably
Tragic.
Yeah, tragic. But both mine and British's volumes are equalized. The output is appropriate. I do not know what's going wrong, so I'll have to do some work with someone else and see what's going. But hopefully we're both audible, and there we go. We can actually move on with the show, and it's not too terrible, right? Nice to see we got 130 people in, which is more than I expected, which is marvelous. So there we are. And my sound is terrible apparently, so we'll have to work on that as well.
As far as the quality of this show is concerned, I mean, given the highlights we have so far produced, this can only go downhill.
Yes. Right. Sorry, I got myself into a role. I did all my introductions, and then we had issue after issue after issue. It's a bit. We accuse people like Carl Benjamin of sound issues and stuff all the time, but I just feel like I'm so guilty of it myself at this point that I cannot speak on behalf of the people calling him Boomer Audio, etc. Although at least I've never done a stream where I spoke for 25 minutes muted and didn't realise for the entire time because I just went off on a massive tangent. But yes, good evening everybody. I'm going to start again, and when this stream goes live I'll cut off this first 10 minutes. Good evening everybody, welcome to Fake Accents Unite. I am joined as always by my esteemed colleague, the Britisher. It's been 3 weeks since we saw you last, and it's a pleasure to be back. I can see our regulars in the chat. I can see Mr. Gently Benevolent in there, Meh, Shord Klatuk, Kathleen Batavian, Admiral Belzadil, TV who laughs, and all the rest. It's a pleasure. Sudskowen is chiming in by saying, "Of course this is all my fault, and how dare you insinuate that I would be the one that's not here on time? Yes, it is my fault."
See, I mean, given that we've only just started, I don't even know what the man is talking about.
No, neither do I. We're just we're not even late after all. We always start at 8:42 on a on a Monday evening. So there we go. Apparently it sounds like I'm on a transatlantic telephone call. I hope it doesn't sound like that in Discord. But yeah, we'll have to do some severe looking into things because the only reason there would be an issue with this is because I've wired the sound card on my motherboard incorrectly, maybe. But we haven't had issues like this before, so I'm, quite concerned.
Well, it could be one of those magic settings, if you know what I mean, where, some Windows update changes something or whatever. I think we've all been caught out once in a while by these things.
I updated OBS today, but that shouldn't affect the microphone quality. Good grief, especially not if you're coming through just fine.
Yes, but you never know what kind of affects compatibility with various software like OBS and whatever that you're running. I'm trying to make excuses for you, man. Go with me here. Go with me.
You're trying your absolute best. I feel like this is the point in the radio show where we introduce some kind of banal pop music that we all hate but have to say that we love for the sake of getting more pop music, and then hash it out in the background. Basically, have our little spat that we're going through.
So while Harold Faltenmeyer's Axel F. The version with the crazy frog.
Are we living in the 90s now? Is that what's going on?
Ding 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 ding, and you just go, oh, for goodness sake, please just someone shoot him.
Sorry, I was quiet then, just to allow anyone who wished to clip the Britisher doing the crazy frog their leeway after the stream. And if somebody posts that to me on Twitter, Parler, Gab, wherever it is that we all end up after the inevitable purge, that'll be great. So
I hate you. I hate you so much.
Now it sounds like my mic is in the other. Look, I've just pushed this sort of thing. Out of curiosity, is it possible we can get Sargon on? Not at this short notice, Glory of Death, although I'm sure I'll have a chat with him and we'll have him on at some point. Or, I mean, I should be going down to Swindon to appear on Lotus Eaters at some point, but it's a bit up in the air at the moment. Right. Have you had a stroke, by the way, Britisher? Because that's what people think that dinging was.
Yes, I mean, that was just my pacemaker, acting up.
Yes. Ding, 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 ding. Not that we take the mick out of the severely disabled on this. It's okay. My father's had a stroke. We can get away with it. The oh yes, people are saying in chat, oh no, oh dear, somebody tell him parlour's down, etc. I know, and we will probably discuss this later on in the show, but not with any great aplomb, I must say. We have had a small um, a small number of super chats come in, which is wonderful. Thank you very much to everyone who continues to keep this show going, despite our sporadic appearance lately, and but obviously hoping to keep this going forward. Sitsgoen says, and for $15 as well. So thank you very much, Sitsgoen. You're not starting off the new year very well, even with a massive 0.2% discount because I'm nice. You're still 1,209,654 seconds late, bringing your total to 4,247,750. Obviously, this is unacceptable, and I remove your discount for being late. Thank you, Sir
0.2% discount.
Yes, he's decided to give us a 0.2% time discount for this one, and now he's getting rid of that. It's the strange the thoughts that go through the mind of the noble Dane. I nearly said Swede, and that really would get me in trouble. I know full well that he's not.
By calling him a vegetable, yes.
Yes, by calling him the vegetable that's suitable, both diced or mashed. I tell you, I don't half come out with some crap on this show.
It's what we're here for.
Yes, indeed. Obviously, what I want to know from you, Bridget, because it's been a while since we've spoken as well. What have you been up to across the new year? Did you have any celebrations? Do you have any New Year's resolutions that you're using to get into this thing, or are you far too jaded for that sort of thing?
Oh, I'm far too jaded. I'm far too jaded and cynical. I mean, one got through the new year, one stuffed one's face with, an obscene amount of food.
Are you now the fatisher? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, yes, very much. I am now the fatisher. Yes.
Someone's going to, someone's going to edit that the other way around, so it says the fascister.
Don't give them ideas.
I am the fatisher. Oh, really? The fatisher, eh?
But yes, I also had a lot of fun sort of watching, sort of over the New Year's, over the Christmas to New Year's period, old programs with a sort of a Christmassy feel to it. Morecambe and Wise Christmas specials, two Ronnie Christmas specials. I took in a lot of porridge, the porridge Christmas specials, and I said, well, what the hell? I'll watch the whole series.
It's been a poor Christmas then. You've
I relied on porridge alone. Yes,
you've only consumed porridge.
It was a Scottish Christmas. Yes,
we have a turkey, although it's a fake turkey constructed entirely out of porridge. It's also been stuffed with oats. Like some kind of strange and ghastly paper mache. I also stuffed myself silly over Christmas. Should be working that off through the year. When it comes to things like New Year's resolutions, and I appreciate we're a little bit late to the mark on this one, I tend to look at it as I see people around me with very reasonable ones, oh, I want to get in shape, I want to ask that particular girl out, I want to move my career in this particular direction, or take up woodworking. And I always think that and they ask you, what kind of resolutions have you come up with? And I like to come up with really the strangest and really most bizarre, not far-fetched, right? Not, I want to...
Okay.
Not, I want to base jump from the Eiffel Tower or something like that, because that would be a little bit ridiculous. But I do like to say things which just make people raise a singular eyebrow, which would be things like, oh yes, I'd like to cure and smoke a whole squid. Or something like that.
Oh.
Something out.
Okay. Yes. That does sound suitably
This is
surreal.
the sort of thing which would make you do a double take because you're going, why on earth would anyone want to do that? Obviously, I have no intention of curing and smoking an entire squid, but it's just
It's funny.
one of those
It's
amusing
it's funny
things.
that you should mention squid because I just late night yesterday into the early hours of the morning
Made love to a
partook of a
squid.
film in which someone ate a live squid.
Was it Oldboy?
It was indeed, yes.
You watched the.
It was a cap. It was a Captain Swiss. It was a Captain Swiss recommendation.
This is I've recommended this film to you a long time ago, but you did not.
Don't recall that seriously. No.
No, I'm sure you don't. But I assume that this is you watched the Korean version.
Yes,
Yes, with subtitles. Because as far as I'm aware, there is a dubbed version which is terrible. Um, some kind of American
I believe there is also a remake.
Yes, that's what I'm referring to. Kind of Americanization of it, and it's just not the same. But no, what did you make of
Well, I mean, everything that's Americanized is better. I mean, just look at Red Dwarf.
that actually? There was so much with the Red Dwarf American version. There was so much behind the scenes drama over that because obviously it was at a time anyway when Red Dwarf was in a bit of a rut, and the ratings were down, and they were frustrated, and the Americans had approached them and said, "Do you want to do this?" And of course, they produced the pilot episode with Robert Llewellyn as Crichton went across and did the pilot, but because of the drama and everyone had said, "Oh, we won't do this and we won't compromise," and we had talked it over, and they'd presented their version of Lister, who was almost like the episode Back to Reality with the despair squid, where they hallucinate
Mm-hmm.
and they come out, right? And the guy who comes in is just like a bigger, broader, sexier version of Lister, and going in and doing that sort of thing. And they'd cast an American with shiny white teeth, 6'6", rippling muscles as the Lister of that dimension, as opposed to the British version
Well,
where
the Hoff wasn't available that week, was he?
effectively. Whereas obviously Lister is charming to the British audience because he's not. He's a space bum. He's not a strapping. He's not Ace Rimmer, right? And part of the reason that we liked Ace Rimmer the thing is also the fact that they lambast him as an insufferable prat. So so there was a lot of drama around this, and he went over and he played Crichton, and it was also terribly scripted, this pilot episode. And thank God it never got off the ground. That's what I have to say to that.
Well, then it could have been one of those which they almost become a form of art because they're so bad. I mean, what were those? What were those films? Was it Plan 9 from Outer Space or something like that? Which, until not too long ago, was deemed the worst film ever made. Um,
What, The Room?
he was the producer was really proud because he'd managed to secure Bela Lugosi to play the main role. Except Bela Lugosi died halfway through, so he got another actor to continue on the role,
I have
who
no idea.
looked nothing like him.
I have no idea. I assumed you were talking about The Room with Tommy Wiseau, but
No, I mean this is what I believe is now deemed the worst film ever. But until then, until the Room came along, it was Ed Wood's Plan 9 from Outer Space.
right, I see. And then this has a cult following of "It's so bad it's good." Is that it?
It's so bad that people went to cinemas to watch it and have a good laugh at this, sci-fi drama. And it was just so bad that even the actor dies halfway through the film, so they just replace him with another actor who doesn't even look like him.
Amazing. The reminds me of the birth of Stargate, actually, briefly, because the chap who was chosen to play Daniel Jackson in that was only chosen because of his stunning resemblance to the actor who had played his character in the film with Kurt Russell. But that's another story in general. The I look at yes, sorry. we were talking about Oldboy before we got onto terrible films,
Yes, somehow,
sort of
yes.
thing. How did you react to the twist? Did you have a mouth agape, or did you see it coming?
No, I didn't see it coming. I really, I must say, it's masterfully done.
And horrific, right? Just
Oh,
absolutely.
it's fantastic. I mean, it really it's what they managed to do so well in that film is
Yes.
it's visceral.
Yeah, yeah.
It it
It's well choreographed as well.
it really kind of gets under your skin. There is something about that film, and I think in particular there's something about that actor. I think if you would have had another actor, it would have not worked. There's something about the whole feel of that chap that makes the whole thing work. And I think there's quite a few films like that where you feel if they wouldn't have had that actor, this would never have worked.
Mm.
And yes, with Oldboy, you really, I mean, it was sort of masterfully done because it has different sides to it. So it, for example, has a very dark sense of humor that once in a while shines through. I mean, you know how they sort of say with comedies, for example, um, it's as if the script writers throw in a few gags at the beginning to give you an idea as to this is the kind of humor you can expect in this film. And
Yes.
in the Old Boy, there is the guy who comes falling off the skyscraper onto the car when he
What?
manages to get out.
When he manages to, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I know by that time the film is has been going for a while, but in a way, now it's in a way come to fruition. Now the story is going. This guy comes out of the. Oh no, I think this is actually before that, because a lot of it's flashbacks, isn't it? So the guy coming out of the sky and hitting the car, um, you can't help but laugh, and he kind of has this devilish smile on his face as he hears the impact and walks on. And you just thought, yeah, I think I know what sort of humor I can expect here. So yes, I was really impressed at it.
Absolutely mad it was. Absolutely mad. But
Oh, insane. I
brilliantly.
mean,
And there's just
it's
all of the elements. Certainly one to recommend. And we are being deliberately vague because obviously we do not want to
yes, yeah. You
spoil.
don't want to give away the
You
ending.
don't want.
Yes.
Don't. It's not just about the ending. There's various bits and pieces woven all the way through, which are really clever and
I mean,
sort of thing.
I must admit to in some places being a bit nonplussed. As in what? You know, as in where are we going here?
Well, it is Korea.
So I mean, it is Korean. It is Korean. You've got the language problem, but as such, sometimes there are odd jumps where you need to readjust. As in, hang on, who's he? you know, when when you're supposed to be dealing with their younger selves, and you're going, you've lost me now for a moment or two. Eventually, you catch up again, but yes, so you do get those odd moments. But as such, yes, I mean, you're willing to forgive that to the film because it is just, an absolute romper stomper.
Yes, and it's definitely worth your time. So, if you're interested, you don't mind subtitles, and even if you do mind subtitles, give it a go. Old Boy. It's quite an old film, but
Well, I mean,
it's very good.
it's yes, the subtitles, yeah, it is a problem. Some people really despise them. Um, I would also caution, it's a bleak, cynical, dark film. I mean,
Yes, don't
you
show
know,
it to children. It's definitely.
don't show it to children, but perhaps also, be in the right mood to watch it. I mean, if you're having a bad
If you if
day and you're feeling a bit depressed, this is maybe not the one to watch. Um,
although it's so surreal, I imagine it probably might even work to take you out of that. It's a yes, it's a thriller. So leave it at that with surreal elements. But moving on, we have a few super chats that have come in. Mr. Gently Benevolent is here. Thank you very much, Mr. Gently Benevolent, who says, "Morning." Yes, we are so early. It's actually at 9 o'clock in the morning. Morning, Mr. Obvious and Nighthawk. Is this your new moniker, Britcher? You're Nighthawk now.
Yes, he has decided that I am Nighthawk. I am René of Allo Allo.
Oh my. How do you chaps feel about true crime? I personally, it's much more my mother's thing rather than mine, but there you go. How do you feel about true crime, Britcher?
Sort of on the more boring side of the family, I think one of my grandmothers watches that sort of thing.
I think I'd rather put 2 tea bags on my eye than on my eyes than watch true crime. That's a very strange reference for anyone. Also, the third audio.
This wouldn't by chance have come from I don't know, a certain regular contributor.
No, not at all. This is Mr. Gently Benevolent, just asking us how we feel about true crime, of course. So there we are.
I'm sorry, yeah, just for a moment I thought you'd skipped into another.
No.
Into another super chat there.
Unfortunately not.
But one thing I think Mr. Gently Benevolent definitely needs to be told about, and that it's not morning. Greenwich Mean Time and all that. We are the zero meridian. We say what time of day it is.
Yes, and we say that there are time zones, Britisher. Regardless. In fact, we're the ones who decide to make the gleeful decision to turn all of India into a singular time zone for our own convenience, despite the fact that on one side it may be morning and the other side night time, despite the time on the clocks being exactly the same. So there's that.
Well, I don't think India is quite that large that it goes from morning to night time.
It
but
does.
I do get what you're saying.
I think you're. I live downstairs from an Indian who quite clearly tells me that it is that large. It's what is it? 1.4 billion people in it, and that sort of thing. So it's it's quite a lot.
Yes, yes, it's a large thing, but I still don't think it's quite that large.
According to what it should be, it should have 3 time zones in it, I think, but as opposed to 12, which yes, I suppose you could say, but this does mean that people do end up getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning when it's bright and sunny, when other people don't. Anyway. Gently Benevolent, Mr. Gently Benevolent finishes off by saying, the third audio adjustment is immoral. So thank you for that, Mr. Gently Benevolent. I shall have to tinker. I can't promise how many audio adjustments there will be, but I hope that there's some kind of equilibrium that's being reached at the moment, and we're both audible and that it's an enjoyable show. Anaquin Cringewalker for $10, thank you very much, says, I cannot fathom the pride of the fence sitter in being proven correct again. Goes to show he can see above the emotion up there. I suggest you launching your own tea line, Britisher's Orange Copium. Britisher, I feel like this is aimed at you more than anyone else.
Well, I mean, I believe this is from the expert on Damnatio Memoriae, which is, of course, something I suggested.
Did you just Latin at me? Did you?
I did.
You dare Latin
yes.
at me?
I dared Latin at you.
Keep that filthy
yes.
Roman tongue in your head.
Well, you see, the reason I can Latin at you in this particular case is because I mentioned Damnatio Memoriae and was then informed by this very gentleman that he had, in fact, just made a video mentioning Damnatio Memoriae on pretty much the same subject.
Shill.
So
Shill.
It's interesting to see how sort of great minds see things in these days. Is all I can say.
And you're saying that as the Britisher, you want to equate your quote-unquote great mind with that of someone who decides to willingly call themselves Anaquin Cringewalker.
Yes, indeed. Yes. It is just about the greatest name on the internet. I'm sorry, I can't help myself.
What about this tea line? What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, I believe there is an opening in the market for a company called Twinnings.
Is their trademark lapsed?
No. There is a company I believe called Twinings in existence, but I believe there is an opening for a company called Twinnings because Based Liz on Twitter showed me a clip of some American gamer type who tested teas so that he knew what it was all about. I mean, this was someone so American and so gamer that he was dunking raw crumpets into tea, thinking that's the way it was consumed.
Ugh, raw
And
crumpets.
if I'm right, if I recall correctly, he liked, was it Twinings English breakfast? I'm not sure, but it was all Twinings. You know, the various types of, you know, sort of half a dozen of them were Twinings this and Twinings the other,
Oh
and
dear.
I was there clawing at the screen, going, "It's Twinings, you," and just yeah.
Bastard. It appears to be snowing outside my window, which is quite unusual for London. But I do hope it doesn't interfere.
Well, I mean, I believe Spain has beaten you to it there, hasn't it?
Yes, but London is a city. It doesn't like you can't just say
Well, so is Madrid.
Yes, I know, but not all of Spain. That'd be like saying London. It's snowing in London. Well, I believe Scotland has you beat there. It's like yes, an entire
Yes, but
country.
what I mean is, snow in Scotland during winter is not really that extraordinary. Just as perhaps the occasional snow in London isn't that extraordinary, whereas heavy snow across Spain is quite staggering.
Oh yes, well you know what they say. The rain in Spain invariably sits over Sussex. So I'm sure.
Indeed, precisely, yes.
I'm sure it's fine. But no, it's the first time I've seen snow here in a long time. So I hope that it's going to stick around a little bit. That'll be fun. It was lightly going the other day. Anyway, that aside, beside my magical offshoot into the weather outside, which is the pinnacle of small talk, right? When it comes to launching a tea line, I think you should genuinely look into the options and that sort of thing, and produce kind of novelty things, even if you're only batching it in, you know, sort of.
What do you mean, novelty?
Novelty, like orange copium, is only going to be relevant for so long, and so if you do a limited run of 50 of those, you could make yourself a little bit on the side. I'm just saying, as an ardent capitalist, you need to look into these things. Nothing wrong with that, and you've already had the idea from Anakin Crinchwalker, who I'm sure you will sling a few shillings when the time is right.
Well, who knows? But yes, I'm still terribly taken aback by the idea that I would produce novelty tea rather than proper tea.
It's proper tea with novelty names, Britisher. Fine. Either way, like, I'm trying to help you here, man. I'm trying to help you. Ludicrous. Yes, the pan tea line, you could call it. That.
Okay, yes, I'm warming to this now. Yes.
Yes, you have Technician 99M to thank for that one. That Indian dude says, "Bravo, Britisher. My problem with this community, in quotes, started with the hot COVID takes. Now they have stormed the Capitol, whipped up by a delusional con man over fake election fraud claims." Any commentary on that, Britisher? Seeing as it's directly at you.
I mean, I'm glad he listens to the week that was.
I need to start doing that again, if only so that I can refute you. The I'm joking, of course. And he comes in as well. Thank you.
Let's put it like this: it was the latest episode seems to have been fairly impactful.
Were you angry, Britisher? Were you raging against the machine?
I actually, you know, normally I quite like to sort of do it nice and calm,
yes,
almost indifferent, you know, and perhaps with a few sarcastic comments thrown in here or there. But this time round, I decided, no, this time round, I'm not going to be indifferent. I'm going to adopt a different tone this time round because I think once in a while the headmaster needs to actually have a stern word.
Well, you should have referred that one to the week that was, as opposed to the week that was, and then given your avatar on that particular screening laser eyes, and then everyone would know that the Britisher is out for blood.
Okay.
Did that
Don't
not?
quite know how to answer that one, but
The week that wars, the Britisher is on the warpath. The bloody Britisher coming to butcher. No, sorry. That's something completely different. But okay. Difference between that and Stern Headmaster Shaw, perhaps. There we go. That Indian dude's also coming in again with another $10. Thank you ever so much. It says, I'm not going to mention names, but I wonder how many in the MAGA sphere know that their chosen messiah is full of manure, but they are afraid of losing their money. I mean, fans. Okay, well, we will come on to the issue of the Capitol, what the mainstream media is calling the Capitol insurrection. Okay, and the interesting things that we've observed from both the left and the right, I think would say, Britisher, that there's been a suitable amount of lunacy on both sides of this, and it's been one of those things where I've kind of questioned some of my convictions with these sorts of things, and also we'll also be doing the COVID thing, which will hopefully be a less hot takey one from that Indian dude's perspective. You have some fans in chat, right, Britisher? Jesus
do I?
Fried Christ says the thickisher
Hmm.
with 2 C's.
I'm assuming this. I don't know whether this is something that alludes to something like my new pan tea line, or whether it is an allusion to his perhaps not agreeing with the latest week that was. I don't know.
No,
We'll just,
he's not calling
who
you
knows?
he's not calling you thick as in stupid, Britisher. He's calling you thick as in thick.
Hmm. Is this maybe due to my heightened calorie intake over the Christmas period? Who knows?
Yes, I hope that the I hope that someone in chat has some artistic skill, or at least Photoshop, and will take Britisher's avatar and provide us with a thickened version. That might be entertaining. The teabag who laughs says, "Mr. Burnsisher." I don't know what that's in particular relation to, where you become Mr. Burns from.
Neither do I actually. I mean, Mr. Burns. I'm assuming this is the guy from The Simpsons, isn't it?
Indeed. I assume so, unless something else is going on. So you need to explain that one to us in the chat, Teabag, just quickly. Give us a little reminder. We'll come back to that one. And Mr. Gently Benevolent, who says, Ace Rimmer, the ultimate
This
Chad.
teabag fella. Does he have a YouTube channel by any chance?
Not that I'm aware of, anyway.
Okay. Yeah. Moving on.
Moving on. Ace Rimmer, the ultimate Chad, says Mr. Gently Benevolent. Yes, he was both the ultimate Chad, but also not Chad. He's in the same way that Lord Flashheart from Blackadder isn't really a Chad. He's a bit of a cad in a Chad's clothing, if that makes sense. And I apologise to anyone who's not.
No, I think there's only one thing one can really say about Ace Rimmer. What a guy!
I think that there's a Chad and a cad in a Chad's clothing, which is quite a nice sentence to say. But no, Ace Rimmer isn't a cad, but he is a little bit insufferable because he lacks the most basic human vices. That Indian dude says, speaking of Korea, going back to Oldboy there clearly, one of my favourite military commanders is Admiral Yi Sun Shin, who fought against the Japanese during the Imjin Wars. Now, that's not a set of wars that I'm particularly familiar with, but that is.
Is this the one who had these tortoise ships, which you kind of you hear about and you see, pictorial recreations of it, and you just go, yeah, right. So yeah, I'm if it is that one, yes, I still think that some of that sounds like a tall tale.
Oh yes, he's the one. Oh no, there's islands here. I can't see anything about him having turtle-shaped ships, but there's a lot of things where he appears to be on a game called Mobile Legends, and there's a lot of artwork of him, and trying to find the actual historical figure apart from this one statue of him is a little bit
That is a
troublesome.
problem, isn't it? Sometimes
Yes.
uh,
Oh yes,
with
he
any
did.
kind of figure that you look for.
He did. He created the.
That,
He claimed that he created the turtle ship. Yes, and they are in. I know these from playing Age of Empires 2 back in the day. But yes, these great kind of boxy ships with great iron uh, or hardwood uh, tops with spikes on and a dragon at the front. I'll see if I can pick up an image for the chat to have a look at, but no, it's just Pinterest, so never mind. Anyway, these great turtle ships. If you search Yi Sun Shin boat, they'll all come up, and they're quite interesting. But what is it that makes them untenable to you in your mind, Brisha?
well, it just, to me, that just doesn't look practical. It doesn't look like a real design. I mean, uh, it, it just looks nonsensical. It looks top heavy. Yeah.
Well, according to the grand source, which is Wikipedia, I'm going to butcher this pronunciation. Uh, Geobuxion, also known as a turtle ship in Western descriptions, was a large type of Korean warship used intermittently by the Royal Korean Navy from the 15th century until the 19th century. So it's quite widespread. They have a replica in
Hmm.
Seoul, and they were used in the fight against invading Japanese naval ships. And it was 3 stories tall. So there we go. So it was quite large. I mean, compared to like the galleons, etc., it's just a bit like a covered galleon, surely. Compared. Well, I
I
don't see.
mean, why did galleons just have fighting nets?
What?
Why didn't they have a heavy, you know, uh, further shield on top of them?
I'm
I would
sure.
say it
I'm.
would more than likely make
They.
them top heavy and unstable.
I'm sure they appreciated the visibility. I'm sure the seas
And
were
and
also
you
different.
would you would also think it, just generally it would make the whole thing a lot heavier, much less maneuverable. Um, always remember, what happened to the galleons. It was the Elizabethan galleons that blew them to pieces because they were much faster and more maneuverable.
They used to. Sorry, I'm just looking at the information on this. Typically, but basically it was a ramming vessel anyway, and also they were used defensively. So they would try and they would cover this board on the top of the ship, which had been covered in metal spikes. Although actual metal being the plating on top is not um, confirmed. It's just the spikes which came through, which were used to discourage boarders. So what they would do is apparently cover these spikes with fishing nets and that sort of thing, and then people would jump on board and spear themselves through the foot and cause loads of issues, covering them with empty rice sacks or rice mats to lure the Japanese into trying to board, since it would appear safe. Although this is unlikely. So there we go. I don't know. I don't know. There's not much here on any controversy about whether or not they actually existed or saw widespread use. But even if it was just a party piece and they rolled out 1 to 5 of them with a main fleet, and that main fleet was the main source of the victory, why not? It's an interesting
Well,
ship
I
anyway.
mean, I just basically reserved the right to doubt, things that come from that part of the world because if you remember correctly, didn't the Chinese already explore at least all the Indian Ocean and much of the Pacific and whatever in massive ships that were many times the size of football pitches? And we're just supposed to believe all that.
I'm really not that familiar with the
So
communists' narrative.
I would take a lot of seafaring tales from that part of the world with a large pinch of salt. No,
We
no,
shall
I'm
see.
quite sure there is there is a sort of a historical reference to a eunuch admiral of the Chinese emperor went out and is supposed to have done a huge amount of exploring with a massive fleet. But some of those ships are supposed to have been, close to oil tankers, if you know what I mean.
Well, you must remember.
And you just think, well, no, I just don't think.
Well, you must remember that I can't really pass any comment because I don't know, but also when taking these things with a pinch of salt, just remember that even if things are exaggerated in terms of scale, doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't a grain of truth in there somewhere. So maybe we'll come back and do a naval episode at some point, and I'll have some guests on which will do that, and we'll talk about that sort of thing and how realistic that actually was. But who knows? Exciting. Anyway, where were we? Yes, the Kathleen Batavian has given us €5. Thank you very much, Kathleen, and says I did an online logic course, but I'm still unable to answer one of the fundamental questions of life. Was the Byzantine Empire Roman? Any thoughts, Britisher?
Oh, I'm not being lured into that one.
The debate has already been made. According to that particular live stream, which he's referring to, the pro-Eastern Roman Empire lot won quite handily. There was that. There was apparently the Byzantines never existed.
Yes, yeah.
The Byzantines, the Byzantines.
The Byzantines, yeah. I mean, of course they did, but let's not go there.
We know that the Byzantines actually did exist, and the reason that we know about this is because the Britisher has been a guest on Fake Accents Unite, obviously, since it began. He's been
since the fall of the Byzantine Empire. Yes,
yes, indeed. But in fact, as we know, you are a time traveller, amongst other things, and obviously you went back in time. And Byzantine is merely a mistranslation of what it was actually called, which is buy some time in order to get us off of our late streak with Fake Accents Unite. And so all of the effort that you put in there will eventually accumulate to over 4.5 million seconds of lost time that we made up from Fake Accents Unite. I appreciate I may be.
I like the way you think that.
I might be reaching a little bit here, but the buy some time empire says more realistic, right? Not that we take ourselves too seriously on this show. I apologise to everyone for this awful aside. Aaron Telford says, how about novelty? That's literature-themed tea, Britisher. I do like the idea of that, novelty. If you don't do it, Britisher, I will. So, that's what I need you to know. Are you still there?
I'm left speechless. What can I say?
You just, we've broken the brain jar, gentlemen. Well done, Aaron. Ratface says, so were the Byzantines Romans? We've already answered this question, Ratface. We're not going through this again, but apparently, yes, the Byzantines
but no,
were
moving on.
Britisher says no, although he refuses to defend his case. Although we've determined that the Byzantines was a mistranslation of the Byzantine Empire, which Britisher set up.
By some time, yes, yeah. But
no,
I mean, you will be familiar with the fact that we have was it DRT is king or something like that. There were several contributors that have asked time and time again about the Byzantines on this stream, but also on the stream I do with British Knight and Rubber. One likes to throw this one at me again and again. So I have answered this one
yes,
many a time.
But now you have a suitable rebuttal, which includes meme magic. So there we go.
By some time, yes.
Yes, the By Some Time Empire, set up by the Britisher at the ripe old age of 20 years old, because a 20-year-old Britisher has nothing better to do with his time than set up an empire to the east of Rome that is not of Rome. And there we go. Hagnar the Viking says, sadly, I will not be able to donate to you and Britisher for a little while due to America's, quote, issues. So I've moved my money around. Enjoy being rid of me. Well, I hope that you keep yourself safe and secure financially and otherwise, Hagnar. And do feel free to keep messaging in the chat, etc. It's always
I think he's being very coy here. So I moved my money around. This sounds suspicious to me.
Well,
Do you think do you by any do you by any chance think the same thing I'm thinking? Maybe he's moved.
maybe he's, and then you cut out Britisher.
Do you by any chance think that he may have moved his money to Germany?
Yes, I hear that those German banks, he's very fond of them. Very fond indeed. It's something about their incredibly systematic nature that really turns it on. And not to mention those sexy
I can see
German,
Hagnar the Viking banking through Frankfurt at the moment.
not to mention those sexy German bank tellers that he's always telling us
You know,
about.
having invested into German, German gilts in euros. Yeah, I can see that really being down Hagnar's road. I think that's why he's being fairly vague on this.
We appear to have lost the Britisher briefly. 1 second. Are you here, Britisher?
I can hear you. Yes.
Marvellous. No idea what happened then, but again, just a random disconnection. I do apologise. We are back. So please stay with me, internet. This show is all I have. I need something to keep me going through the madness.
But
Yes.
they're saying buffering and whatever. Oh no, it's now we have Jesus fried Christ saying it's back, so we are back.
Yeah, no, we are back. I got a nice little reconnection thing, but yes, my internet decided to die briefly for 30 seconds and then reconnect itself, and now I'm staring at the little symbol with barely contained hope that it will remain so. Anyway, what were we saying? What were we saying? We were talking about Hagnar's predilection for German women.
For German banking, yes.
Banking.
And I was wondering aloud whether he's ever going to talk to us again after this.
He says he claims never in chat, but we'll see about that. Oh dear. Okay. Moving on. Mr. Gently Benevolent says, disavow fake Rome. Byzantine. I keep changing the way I pronounce this every single time, and it amuses me. Byzantine were little more than LARPers, led by a man with a fake nose.
Okay, yes, I can buy that.
Do you have a fake nose, Britisher?
Oh, all the time.
Do you put on different sizes? It's like a.
Oh yes, yeah. According to what day it is, I wear a different one.
It's like you have one. It's like various different sizes of codpiece, but for your face.
Yeah, precisely.
The nose piece. I'm reminded of Blackadder with his comical codpiece. Anyway, that Indian dude says, last chat, chaps. You've been very generous this evening, that Indian dude, so thank you very, very much for this. I admire Vietnamese history. Defeated the Mongols during Kublai. Gave the Japanese, the French, the Americans, and the Chinese bloody fights. Well, clearly I need to do more research on the wars in the East, because I'm not familiar with most of these victories, but it doesn't surprise me. The Vietnamese seem to be a tenacious bunch, if only with going off their endeavours with the Americans, as it were.
I really wouldn't have a clue regarding the Vietnamese. I mean, I would have always assumed that they fell under the sort of sphere of Thailand or whatever. That in my mind, not that I know, I'm just speculating here, that in a way the two big powers were China to the north and then Siam to sort of the southwest, and I would have assumed that they were kind of the sort of poor sod in the middle that got squeezed one way or the other, if you know what I mean. But maybe that's a completely idiotic take. I don't know.
We have some information that's come in actually about these turtle ships. As is going on.
Go on.
So this is from Anaquin Cringewalker, who says the turtle ship was real, but it was mainly made of wood with metal shields. Think of a Viking longship with their shields arrayed along the edges. The Koreans were just smart enough to make these shields hexagonal instead of circular. The main thing was that the Koreans built these ships without metal nails. The Japanese did. So the wooden ships with their metal edges would crush the wooden ships with metal nails because the nails rusted. After a week or two at sea, the Japanese ships had rusty nails and were falling apart, whilst the Koreans were fine. So the key to the Korean naval victory was to simply outrun them for a few days, and then ram them when they had corroded enough.
I'm not sure I buy that. No, I can well imagine the shield thing. That if it's just normal shields that are kind of they've arrayed them in a certain way, I could see that happening rather than sort of really solid wood with big metal spikes in them. If it's just shields, so just think of knightly shields, or when you think hexagonal, you could even think of sort of rectangular Roman shields. That you could do something with that. But when it comes to a ship with metal nails, basically being being rammable after a few weeks, I don't buy that. I would think that if the nails would rust that quickly, which I don't think they would, I think those ships would then already become susceptible to the sea tearing them apart rather than they're being vulnerable to ramming. So yeah, I'm highly skeptical about that latter part.
You, Britisher, a skeptic of any sort? That's very unusual. Normally, you believe anything that comes your way, really,
Oh
don't
yes,
you?
yeah. I just you just tell me something, I just buy it. Yeah.
Absorb any narrative, from from QAnon to lizard people, and suddenly you're on board. Ridiculous.
Well, why are you mentioning the lizard people as something ridiculous? I mean, I heard Alex Jones assure people that the lizard people. No, please, moving on.
Moving. Finally, Jedi Knight Anakin.
Don't make me quote David Icke at you.
Oh, goodness me. Sorry, second Jesus Ike, or whatever he was. Anakin Cringe says...
Jesus 2.0.
Yes. Didn't he announce that at like a train station as well? It was some bizarre thing where he had been living as a cross-dresser.
As you do.
And basically sleeping... Oh, maybe I'm thinking of someone else. Maybe I'm thinking of another conspiracy theorist who was also completely mad. But basically, he did this really dodgy thing, and he believed on some hallucinatory trip that he had been chosen as the second Messiah, and he called this press conference. And quite a few people turned up. He announced that he was Jesus, and then nobody ever contacted him for comment again. Funnily enough. But maybe I'm thinking of someone
it wasn't
else.
the road to Damascus, it was the train to Darlington, was it?
But yes, Jedi Knight Anakin Cringe says Hagnar needs to tell us if he found any Germans in the Capitol, and Hagnar, I believe, responded in chat saying, "Did you see any Germans there? I've done my job." So there we go. Right.
Jesus Fried Christ insists that he's Jesus in capital letters.
Well, he may be a Jesus, but I doubt he's the Jesus. That's the way I put it. There's no problem with that. Right. We must cover for the last bit because the proletariat they expect it from us, Britisher. They demand their filthy political discussion.
So the proletariat. So these are the proletarians. So these are the proletarii. These are the poor sods who have no armor, no equipment, and nothing.
Well, I don't know about that.
Yeah, that's where the term comes from. In the sort of the old Roman army.
Yes, Britisher, but I'm
proletarii were just basically, you were expected to bring your own equipment and your own armor, but of course the urban poor had nothing. So they would more than likely fashion some kind of sling or something. So they turned up in a tunic and sandals and perhaps had a sling with them or something like that. And those were the proletarii. So that's where Marx seems to have got that expression from.
Well, you don't seem to understand that I'm backtracking now because that's quite the insult to our poor audience otherwise. I think I meant to say plebeian, and then said proletariat instead. Clearly, I've been ingesting too much communist propaganda in the meantime, or listening to too much Navarra media. Ugh, goodness me.
Well, plebeian really just means not noble.
Yes.
So you could actually be stinking rich and plebeian.
Yes. I'm not calling them poor. Anyway.
You don't want to dissuade them from the super chats now, do you?
Never, never, of course. I do want to. There we go. Look at this pleb who can't even stream without buffering, looking down at his betters. Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. Thanks, chat. Thanks. Yeah. As I say, I'm just looking at this and going, let's not piss off the audience now by making up, salacious lies about them. That's a bad idea. The yes, no. So news. We're getting to the news because we got
There was news.
half an hour, maybe an hour left. Depends how long we go. So
I mean, the last 3 weeks in which we weren't on air, nothing happened. I think we've agreed on that by now, haven't we?
it didn't, but at the same time, the colonials appear to be having a spat, right? So
it's one way of putting it.
It's one way. I don't know. I'm going to piss people off with that particular sentence, but I'm just not taking it seriously. Or because if you take these things way too seriously, then you end up too stressed in your own head. And I was just going round and round and round in circles. But I've been interrogating some of my own thoughts with regards to the Trump thing, but also the COVID thing recently as well. And we'll start with whichever you hate the least, Britisher. So which would you prefer? Will we talk about the Capitol, or are we going to talk about?
I'm actually
COVID?
I'm kind of fairly fine either way. I mean, let's start with the Capitol, shall we?
Start with the Capitol, right? So obviously on the 6th.
Sorry, I'm just trying to swallow fruit pastels quickly before we start digging into this.
That sounds like one of the most uncomfortable things to swallow quickly, given that it's coated in crystalline sugar with quite jagged edges. If you have that incorrectly, but good luck with that, Britisher. All right. So as we know, Trump's legal challenges have all fallen through at this point. Yep. In the vast majority of cases, whether the manner in which it has been dismissed is largely irrelevant, other than the fact that it has been dismissed. So there are some which have been thrown out on legitimate grounds, there are some which have been thrown out on technical grounds, and there are some which are ongoing. But the vast majority of these things, the quote-unquote Kraken, etc., has all been rejected due to this lack of standing sort of thing. And it's been interesting to observe the behaviours of both sides on this. So you've got, on one hand, the mainstream left and the people who are very anti-Trump, who are, have been screaming at this point that, you've got no standing, you've been rejected, you have no evidence. This is really frustrating. This is obviously irritating to the Trump supporters who believe that they do have evidence and that they're not being allowed to be heard. That's the prevailing thing. They're not being allowed to be heard. They're not being given their day in court. It's not just that things have been rejected through the due process. They've not even been given due process, and that's where a lot of the frustration is coming from on the Trump side. Additionally, you have this January 6th speech which comes up. Donald Trump turns up and says, he gives a speech. He lays out all of the evidence. I was watching this actually on the Independent, or the Independent's YouTube channel, and I had to switch to a Yahoo broadcast because whenever he talked about the election fraud, or indeed about the Hunter Biden situation, of which once I switched over, it was clear he was only making statements which were, either completely ratified or common knowledge, right? It's nothing controversial, no accusations above and beyond what we would expect, right? And he made this speech laying out basically all the evidence over an hour and a half or so. that as he saw it, about all these different ballot cases and everything like that, and then said, we're going to march down to the Capitol whilst they're having this debate over what they're going to do with ratifying the election results, and we'll see where it goes from there. At the same time, Mike Pence had submitted a letter that day which said that he was basically not, it was unconstitutional for him to take any kind of executive position on this, and so he was basically handing it to the House, as it were. And that was that. And that was seen again by the Trump supporters, who are already a little bit riled up by the fact that they've just had the entire case laid out to them as they see it from the Trump side of things. They're fired up. They feel he's betrayed them a little bit because he was supposed to be a bastion to help them get their case heard, or at least delay the certification or whatever.
And Mitch McConnell, of course, also spoke up and said that he's not going to oppose this because if the losing side basically starts refusing the result, well, where will we ever be? I mean, that's pretty much what he said in the speech.
Yeah.
That from then on, every single time you have an election, the losing side is going to dispute it. So yes, those you had Pence and you had Mitch McConnell. So you had the vice president basically saying that he isn't going to do what he's being called upon by the president, and the Republican leader of the Senate also saying, "Look, this is just not going to happen," and therefore it became plain, that one side had won and the other one had lost in this encounter, as I think was fairly predictable.
The interesting thing with it was, so they reached the Capitol. It appears that they were allowed very close to it. The police were pulling back barricades, from what I saw, and allowing large groups of protesters through. And then, all of a sudden, the next thing we know, people are inside the building, swarming around, destroying property, and led by a man who appears to be wearing an outfit out of the hinterlands of Norway, with an American flag painted on his face. And then he's kind of storming forward, and of course the rest of everyone's evacuated. There were 5 deaths, I believe. There are two security guards who were killed, or police, and 3 protesters, including this woman who was shot, by, and a video has obviously been making the rounds. And obviously there's people going. So on the one hand of this, I can understand very much the frustration of the Trump protesters who have gone in, and they're at the point now where they believe that there is no recourse. They've tried for a couple of months, it feels like, to get their voice heard, to have their day in court, to provide all the evidence that they can. Nothing sits right with them. Morally, it feels wrong, obviously. And so you've got this kind of bubbling pot of frustration. Although it's really unclear to me what the goal was. There's obviously the riot aspect of a few people who are very frustrated out of this. I don't know how many people were in the crowd, but there's these people who are very frustrated, and then have charged through the building. Other people who are just sort of caught up in it and wandering through the building in a kind of bemused, befuddled state, or treating it like it's a LARPing day out. To one extent, I wonder how much of the crowd was made up by people who are not actually that invested in the fight as much as what we might call the memes, given the number of people who were kind of uh, smiling and joking and laughing around as they wandered through the Capitol. What the news has described as storming, right?
And I actually quite agree with storming.
You agree with storming? Fair enough. We'll take that framing then. And we're also unclear as to what the actual goal was, because it appears to have been very spur of the moment. I do very much disagree with the connotation that it was an insurrection, because where do you go from there? Like, you take over this one particular building, everyone gets evacuated, and then nothing happens, right? So it's like there's this minor disruption which shouldn't have happened. In fact, was actively discouraged by the Trump and his team. And whilst they were trying to actively discourage it, you've got Twitter, which is blocking all of the messaging that he's trying to get out. And in fact, at the end of the speech that he gave, he said, you know, we're going to march over there, and I want people to protest peacefully and patriotically. So it's all got a bit out of hand with that. It's unclear who's on who the instigators are in terms of actually breaking in, but it appears that a large number of people have been placed on a no fly list, right? So this is frustrating. I hate the fact that there is the Twitterati's crowing over these no fly list videos, but at the same time, it is trespassing on government property. It's not something that you do. This is never going to solve anything, and so it should never have happened, right? There's certainly not enough widespread support for Trump's cause, despite the fact that, 70% of his supporters say they believe the election was stolen, which was a statement which was made on CNN, actually, this morning. And it was very frustrating because it completely ignores the fact that around 30 to 35% of the Democrats believe that the election was stolen, right? It's not an this election is very much a non. It's still a partisan issue, but it's a very confused issue. It's one where nothing is very clear. I don't think it's going to be very clear, because if Joe Biden instigated a widespread fraud and his administration did, or cells of people did so, then he's now got the reins and he's going to do everything he can to cover that up, and it's never going to see the light of day. And if he didn't, then there's no evidence to speak. There's less evidence to speak of anyway, and Joe Biden just happens to be the most popular man in all of American history. Although it is something to say that the lockdown, like, people talk about the turnout for this election, and say it's ridiculous. And personally, as someone who comes down on the side that I would rather that there was the day in court. It's very frustrating that there's not the day in court to overview the evidence, etc. As someone who wants to see that happen, it's still it should be clear that we were going to get unprecedented numbers of people voting anyway, just because of the massive increase in postal voting, mail-in ballots, but also because of the lockdowns and COVID thing. Everyone has a lot more, not free time, but time to think about these things outside of work.
Everything is heightened.
Yes, including emotions, because everyone's frustrated with this thing, either because they want to see harsher lockdowns or none of them, right? So you get a lot more political feeling going. So it's really unclear to me. I just want the truth to come out, right? That would be nice. I don't think we're going to get that. I have my own position on what I think the truth is, which YouTube would not allow us to really discuss. So, and that sort of thing. But on the other side of things, you've got to be happy to be proven wrong if you can be proven wrong. I just think that it's not being proven any which way at the moment, which is very frustrating. So then we have the response to this.
I mean, in all fairness, it would be very difficult to prove it the other way, wouldn't it? I mean, it's this thing of, what needs to be proven, if you know what I mean. It's very difficult to prove that it would be.
They don't need to prove anything, but the side with something to prove needs to be able to have a space in which to prove it, right? Which is what I'm talking about. There's no space to prove it at the moment, because it's either being denied on a technicality or it's being thrown out outright for various little bits and pieces, and it makes it very muddy and hard to interrogate the evidence. What I've seen seems to indicate one thing, but I'm happy to be proven wrong on this, as long as by proven wrong I mean have it shown to be false. But what can you do if they won't hear it?
I
They won't
think
hear it.
I think as such we would all love there to be a sort of decisive way to settle this. Whether it's a court case or whatever, something that provides you with the coin toss,
Yes.
whereby you have a result.
Yes.
But my feeling would be that even if you would have, the day in court, um, there would then still be the refusal to accept it either way.
Well, I don't care about what other people accept or not. I just would like to. I would like to be able
Well,
to.
yes, but what I mean is you would then immediately have the sort of industry of either side immediately going into overdrive
Well, yes,
to
but
make you doubt it every which way by telling you about what the judge said about such and such
well,
political party when he was 14. And
well,
do you understand what I mean?
well. I don't find that compelling enough reason to not go through with it anyway. As I would say, although the idea of finding an unbiased jury is somewhat of a would be somewhat of a nightmare, would it not? Although Supreme
Well, I
Court
mean,
or
as
whatever,
such, I don't think this would really be.
a jury
I mean, I don't
case.
think this would be a jury case, would it?
No, probably not. It would all go to the Supreme Court, and that's where it would sit. Anyway, so
And I think the Supreme Court kind of indicated quite clearly, that it wasn't really willing to touch this one.
yes, which is
Um,
irritating because this is the only, they could have done a lot to, I think, prevent the inflammation of tensions that their refusal caused. Because even if people saw progress as happening, even if slow, it's something else. I think the biggest issue for this is that the American system is not robust enough to deal with this situation, right?
well, I mean, this is something I have said repeatedly that we have actually known that the American electoral system was in a bad way for some time. I mean, there was the famous, 2000 election with Al Gore and George W. Bush, which turned into a complete farce in Florida, with hanging chads and pregnant chads and whatever. And again, it was, oh, well, we've got these clever machines and they punch a hole in the voting card for the voter. And you just go, this is for the voters that can't make a cross on a piece of paper, is it? We knew at the time that there were problems. Um, one thing that has to be said is, where was the president over the last 20 years, including this one, who came in and said, okay, right, let's do something about electoral reform?
Well, no, because
We haven't
immediately he
we
would be
haven't really seen anything in that regard.
in that sense. You see it every time because whenever Labour get into power, they try and redraw the constituency lines and vice versa. And the over here this is, but the uh, you know because they have a representative democracy system, they know that whoever gets in doesn't typically have a majority, right? They have whatever it is, 40% of the vote or whatever. And so what actually ends up happening is um, that if they do it, they get attacked from all sides as doing something unconstitutional or that's going to advantage them and disadvantage their opponents unfairly and reduce
Well,
the viability of the system.
you see, I think when it comes to establishing a reform that the public can believe in, I think I don't really think that would necessarily have to be an issue where the two sides need to tear each other apart,
Well, it
because
doesn't need to be,
neither of
but
the two sides trusts the other.
no,
So,
but
in
that
that regard, if you have a system that is, possibly dodgy, then it basically it suits the defensive instincts of either side to not allow the other side the possibility to do something. Do you understand what I mean?
well,
So,
all I'm saying is like you take it depends how little trust there is between the sides because as we know things have been accelerating, shall we say, in terms of the divisions over there, and the like Trump, I believe, and don't quote me on this. He tried to get voter ID instigated, didn't he? Although it is at state level, but he tried to basically encourage all the states to pass a voter ID thing where you had to show ID in order to vote, right? So the issue for me is what I wanted to get back with the lack of robustness is that they don't have the time to deal with these things. This is effectively what would take in a typical legal jurisdiction, as has been said by almost all of the lawyers involved in a case and people in the legal profession who I've chatted to about this, that this is usually a case which would take, in typical framework, probably a decade or more to sort out if it was something on this scale and the evidence was compelling, or at least some of the evidence was compelling. A case which covers multiple states, that implicates multiple factions, multiple people, possibly multiple large politicians. And so this is something which is not going to be done in a 1.5 month grace period that's supposed to be just so that the other administration can get ready to move out and the other one can get ready to move in. It's
Oh no, I mean once you're in once you're in the transition period and everything, it's way too late. But
they have no
that's what.
defense against this. Like there's no way to
Sorry.
there's no way to extend that transition.
Well, no. I
And
mean, the last time round in 2000, they kind of managed it ish, to get it sorted with the Supreme Court ruling and whatever. But already then, people were kind of thinking, look, this sounds a bit like a farce because the courts are just they seem to be voting according to their weighting of Republican and Democrat judges, but already then one kind of saw that this situation was rather wobbly. And as I say, that's 20 years ago. And you think, look, you've had ample time to sort something out here. And I think with the Republican side, it more than likely was a lack of urgency because they won last time round when it came to that. But with the Democrat side, who knows? But as such, yes, I think it would be in everybody's interest, and particularly also in the party's own interest, to get something sorted here, because there is no way that this can kind of limp on sort of ad infinitum, because last time round it was Russia. It was the Russians. This time round, it's massive fraud, hoax, whatever. And you look at it and just go, well, do any of us really believe that the next time round, whoever wins or loses, there won't be another claim that the president is, lacks legitimacy? Always remembering that even before we had with the Obama election, there was then a question of his legitimacy regarding his actual birth certificate.
Yes, didn't that involve Trump as well? That was quite.
Well, yes, I think he was also part of that.
When it comes to that, it is interesting to think back to 2016 because in the run-up, obviously, to the election results for that one, Trump was saying it's a fraud and they're never going to let me be president. Right? He basically ran on a platform of saying they will never let me be president, and therefore I'm going to say what I want. Aside from all the build the wall rhetoric. So it like him using this as a technique is well documented in general. What we've obviously seen in the wake of this, and is the left going absolutely batshit crazy, especially when it comes to the sudden deplatforming of thousands of conservative and Trumpian Twitter accounts, including the man himself, and then shutting down all of the opposition, deplatforming, like mass collaboration between all of the major tech companies who have just basically decided that enough is enough. There was some CNN reporter this morning who said, where is this? Yes. The problem with listening to Trump supporters today versus 4 years ago is how many of them have become delusional and untethered from reality. You aren't being silenced. and that's why we're not going to listen to you anymore. And you just listen to that, and you just go, "You're not being silenced, therefore we're going to silence you." You've got this.
Yeah. I mean, the you're not being silenced. That is farcical. I mean, that's ridiculous. But I think you're sort of touching on something that kind of ties into the whole thing. As in with election reform. Because I think for the next 10 years at least, this is going to be a major issue. Because when it comes to the social media companies, their influence on this, my feeling is that some of the inexplicable phenomena regarding this election are actually due to the hitherto unwitnessed influence of social media companies rather than election fraud itself.
Obviously they've decided that they are above any and all elected officials,
and what we have seen is quite staggering. I mean, I mentioned towards the end of the week that just these last few days, I mean, I had a really, really good laugh because on my mobile phone I'm not signed in. So if I ever go onto YouTube, it's just basically the blank thing of, and whenever I looked for the Britisher, I always got pretty much promoted videos, you could say, of far-right accounts, having a go at me because of my ethno-nationalist video. But they were pretty much ahead of everything. And everything of my own. So it seemed to me that something was being heavily promoted, heavily pushed. And I have long had this theory that the social media companies were actually deliberately promoting far right and QAnon and stuff like that, because it enlarged the bogeyman and therefore gave them more leeway to claim powers to censor.
You mean effectively? You mean effectively a controlled opposition, right? Like, but
whatever you want to call it.
But in a much more.
It clearly there was an element of promotion going on in order to make the bogeyman bigger than he would otherwise be, and therefore it then grants them power. It grants them in the media that it gives credence to the narrative that, oh well, in that case we need to curate material, we need to have the right to censor. But the people that were censoring were not actually the people who they claimed were the reason they needed to have those powers, because the people they claimed were the reason were the very people they themselves were promoting. And the reason I laughed so hard was, I think it was Friday that I suddenly, I just by chance sort of thought, well, let's check this again, entered it, and they weren't gone, but they were way, way down the list. You really had to scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll until these videos turned up. Whereas before, they were top of the list. And you just thought, well, yeah, clearly what you're seeing is, what was he called? Epstein, Professor Epstein, not the man who didn't kill himself. Professor Epstein, the one who was in Congress about the manipulation by the by the social media companies. I mean, he suggested that there's millions of votes at play here. He also said that the whole thing is ephemeral, that there is no trace of anything they've done. So precisely that, if they're pushing videos like that, you will know about it if you go looking for it to see what's happening. But it doesn't leave a trace. There's nothing there afterwards. So they can do these things, and it's a complete, it's black art that they can apply. But what was so funny, what made me laugh so hard, is that suddenly, oh, the Capitol has been stormed. Oops, quick, delete everything. Stop promoting this stuff. And you just go, yeah, really? You know, I mean, in that case, it was just so bleedingly obvious what had just happened that they had pulled the plug on things they had been promoting. That yes, I think when it comes to these things, you know, there's a lot to answer for, but the power these companies wield, not just in whom they can deplatform, but in the more subtle areas of how they can influence the public, what they can bring to the fore, so that if you put in certain search terms, what do you get? That is incredibly powerful. And like that, they can influence everything. And they have sort of subsumed everything. I mean, I was just listening to Douglas Murray earlier today, and he was sort of saying this is a monster that consumes everything. You know, I would sort of say it's a sort of it subsumes everything. It makes everything subject to itself, so that we talk about how manipulative the media is or whatever, but they are the ones who decide which media you get to see.
I mean, all you
You
have
know,
to.
when you put in your search terms, they are the ones who then decide which media gets voice.
Well,
So the
let's
power of these companies is just
Bridger,
remarkable.
Bridger. Let's even take it simpler. You just look at the way that the people who run these social media enterprises treat their children. As in, they do not allow them to use social media because they know the damage that is being done or the what is being wrought on there, and they don't want their kids caught up in it. They don't let them use it, which is very interesting to me anyway. Right, I do want to move on from this generally because yeah, I think we've outlined the situation there, and hopefully people in the chat have got some stuff out of it. I will read the incoming super chats so that we can polish this topic off and then move on to our final topic of the evening. EC90 for
And I
yes.
think everybody week that was knows that I was terribly restrained.
I'm sure you were, Brisha. EC90 for 10 English pounds, thank you, sir, says they could try and explain why there was apparently a linear relationship between the number of people voting straight Republican down ticket whilst also voting for Biden as president in Michigan. Yes, there's obviously all these different bits of evidence which, in my opinion, need to be interrogated and viewed in a court of law and explained as more than just a statistical anomaly. You know, especially the ones which are approaching, you know, impossibility, and it's just not happening at the moment. And I don't believe at this point that it will ever happen. So it'll be an interesting one. Radhanis the Bold says the legal system being unrobust is not the issue. Electronic counting can never be trustworthy. Petition the Dems to do something about that. I don't live in America, so I won't be petitioning the Dems. But yes,
Well,
Americans using electronic voting is also very just dodgy anyway. Why remove a
when
vector for
it
potential
comes, you know, I
uncertainty?
think on one of the week that was a few weeks ago, I said, you know, there is this problem. It's almost like an ideological problem. There are certain places where capitalism doesn't belong. And there is this, oh, well, you know, free market, you know, we here's a company that can sell us stuff and there's nothing wrong about profit and whatever. No, you don't need any machines to do this. You know, the machines already undermined all the faith when there were still these punch card things in Florida. Now you've got electronic ones. You know, why do you need these machines? Just piece of paper, names, give them a biro, tell them to make a cross on it. It's not beyond the wit of man. And there's no need to have companies that are making millions either way in this thing. And it's not communist, it's not this, it's not the other. The main thing in these processes is to basically instill trust within the populace that this thing is going right and that is being run properly. And I'm sorry, the moment you enter the profit motive, you know, the profit motive into the whole thing, everybody becomes suspicious. What are these companies? Who are these companies? You know, what are their interests? And you just think, well, no, that there's no need for them. Simplify the whole thing and just get on with it. And yes, I think that would just be advice number one. Go back to pen and paper.
So there we go. Also, Green God who stobs Muir says, "Hey lads, just wanted to say that was a banger of a video yesterday, Britisher."
Well, glad you liked it. Not everyone did, but I'm glad you liked it.
Nice to see you, Green God, as well. I hope you had a lovely New Year. Right, so we have our final topic of this evening, which is the COVID thing, and obviously it's going to be a short topic, this one, but there are two things. So one is they're discussing tier 5.
Mm-hmm.
We're already in alert level 5 tier 4, and for anyone who doesn't know, tier 5 is you are allowed to leave your house once per week, and there are no support bubbles. So there's that. Personally, I think I'd go completely insane if this were the case. At the very least, I need to get out of the house to get some fresh air. But it's not like I have a garden I can escape to. But yeah, what do you make of potential tier 5? Do you think it's likely to happen, Britisher?
I think there is a good chance that something will happen. It may not necessarily take the form that people are presently describing, but I was out and I struggled to cross the road, and I thought this is a bit silly because it must have been sort of towards the evening. I was coming back from the city centre with my trusty Tesco shopping bag, and I tried to get across the road, and shoosh, 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 one car after the other, and they were heading into town. And I was sort of thinking, what are all these people having to do in town? And, we're not talking 2 or 3 cars. And I think that is the problem that the government is seeing, that it's not that they want to nail everybody down so nobody comes out of the house. It's that they want it more manageable to spot who is actually completely flouting the rules. Because I think that is what is, there's a lot of that which is presently driving this problem at the moment.
Right. So you're saying that people are flouting the rules, but it's unclear who is. Is that what you're saying?
Well, well, put it like this: when we went back to March or whatever, if you went out, it was like a complete ghost town.
Yes.
Now you go out and it looks nothing like it did back then. And back then they managed to get the R rate down, and they managed to get the whole thing reducing again. And this time round, they're really struggling with that. And you just have to ask yourself, well, if everybody is staying at home, if everybody is staying indoors, and people aren't really mixing, how is this happening? Are they kind of transmitting this to each other psychically? And you just think, well, one has to somehow reduce the amounts of contacts people are getting, and chances are that does seem, there is a lot of flouting of rules. And if you go back to the situation where there really are only 1 or 2 cars, then it may well become a lot clearer who is actually just flouting the rules, as opposed to, some of these people are genuinely going to work, and the other 3/4, well, they'll just get away with it.
So apparently we missed a super chat from Staff Sergeant Sniper, so we will come back to this, obviously. But he says, so, whether I am a bad person for having been at the Capitol performing first aid outside was never answered the other day. Apparently, I think that's probably directed at you, Britisher. I don't know about that. I wasn't on a stream the other day, so is this one for you?
I don't know.
when it comes
I
to,
don't know what that refers to. I'm sorry.
I assume he's talking about the Capitol, right? So he's talking about being at the
Also,
Capitol,
he was at the Capitol rally and
doing
he
first aid.
performed
First aid.
first aid outside.
Yes. I don't see
Well, I
that.
mean, as long as he wasn't storming the place, I don't see what he's referring to.
I mean, saving, helping people and keeping them healthy is always admirable. So, nothing against you there, Staff Sergeant Sniper. I hope you did that. I apologise for missing that one. Streamlabs decided not to pick that one up. It's picked up every other super chat this evening, but not that one apparently. So, sorry about that. I don't know whether or not you're shadow banned on the platform or something, and it just isn't picking them up. I don't know. Anyway, but back to the
Yes,
code.
this shadow banning art is another one of those things, isn't it? I've noticed on Twitter that sometimes if I go into a thread, I see responses, but they don't as such come up. And I remember also, again, there's something I mentioned yesterday, that, a few years back, I'm assuming you were around at that time, not so obvious, there was an app that somebody made that for a while worked, before obviously Twitter then clocked it and changed its code, in which you could enter your Twitter account and it would show whether you were shadow banned or not.
Yeah. I remember this. Yeah.
And well, yes, I mean, I'm assuming most of the people you knew turned out to be shadow banned.
Yeah. Most of them.
So yes,
I wasn't worthy. But,
it's really grim what's going on with and I think that's almost more worrying than the deplatforming thing. The deplatforming thing is bad. That the power that they have in that regard, albeit, as I said yesterday, when it comes to Trump, I'm afraid I think they can do it with him. But when it comes to just ordinary Joe Schmo, and they're just sort of taking off, that's not good. But at least they're being honest about what they're doing. But with all the other stuff, with this suppression and promotion and shadow banning and all this stuff, I think that's worse, because something is being done which you have no way of knowing about,
you're
which is,
you're deranking. Yeah. Social credit
that
score, but
basically you're
behind the
just
scenes.
making sure that nobody can see what you're actually tweeting. And that sort of stuff, to my mind, that there's something devious about that side of things. But anyway, sorry, we've suddenly drifted back into the the previous subject.
Yes. Staff Sergeant Sniper has clarified on this by saying it was the British calling regarding him calling everyone thugs. I performed first aid on those injured during the second barricade fight. So presumably there's that.
Those folks were part of the barricade fight, then yes, they were part of the thugs.
There we go. The British's position is clear. I haven't really observed, so I don't know. The on the COVID thing, so I was thinking about the vaccine, for instance, and I was like, several of my friends were like, "I'm not going to get the vaccine. I'm healthy enough, etc., etc." And that general stuff. If it doesn't stop me getting infected and transmitting it onto other people, I shall trust my 99% effective immune system for this. And I'm thinking about this in a way, and I'm going, well, that's a relatively reasonable position to have for a young person who's fit and healthy, etc., etc. But when it comes to some of the crazier vaccine claims, the amount that it can influence your DNA, etc., they're putting some kind of poison in it. I'm going. This seems to be on the level of vaccines cause autism. It's really an unsubstantiated pseudoscientific nonsense that would require so much collaboration from so many different people on so many different levels, from distribution to research and development, to create such a vaccine, which has had a very quick development, it is true. However, the vaccine has been, it's not, the research that was done onto the vaccine, for instance, was not just coming out of the ether. They were already trying to develop a vaccine for a particular coronavirus, and they just slotted COVID-19 into the raft of coronaviruses that they were developing for, and obviously prioritized getting that one done first. But regardless of that, I just don't see the intention with these sorts of things for that to be a a huge thing. It's not like we look at something like the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine, or something for yellow fever, etc., as these malicious things that are really going to damage your health or, um, your children's health and that sort of thing. Do you know what I mean?
I don't see how it could possibly be malicious. I
Yes.
mean, here we have got the entire economy with this millstone round its neck. We've got a massive issue, and then we've got a possible solution, and oh well, no, there's a conspiracy,
Well,
and you just go,
it's not
well,
just one solution either. It's three.
yes, and there may well be more. But you look at this and you just go, well, as far as I'm concerned, I'll take that vaccine tomorrow.
Well, it's well, for me it's like, well, I could understand reticence when it comes to the RNA one. I would take the Oxford Zeneca vaccine if it comes up. Um, and it's one of those things where it's not going to hurt me to take it. It's based on existing technology that is tried, true, and tested, and that's just the case with it. I can understand, I wouldn't want to take the RNA vaccine. If that's the one that's on offer to me, I will probably say no thanks. But that's just because I don't understand the long-term ramifications of this. Now, the way that vaccine works is apparently it utilizes mRNA, which is the thing spat out by your chromosomes, which tells your cells to make certain proteins, right? So this mRNA that they're injecting into you is effectively a one-time work order to produce a particular protein with the kinds of spikes that are on the COVID-19 viral cells, and the immune system will then attack that and get used to it. And that could be an amazing technology that really comes in useful and is really interesting and beneficial to the human race later on. I don't know it now. They claim it's a one-time work order, but we don't know whether or not it really is in the long term, or whether or not it does anything else. So there's that. Not to mention the expense, right, of trying to keep these sorts of things. It's much more expensive than a conventional vaccine. So in terms of the long-term viability, it's interesting. But I look at that and I just go, you're dealing with something where people assume that our knowledge of how to manipulate such things in order to make them much more harmful um, is greater than it is. We've When it comes to things like gene therapy and that sort of thing, the closest we've got at the moment is CRISPR, CIRSPR, which is only legal at the moment in China, and we're not going anywhere near. So, it's sort of that's the kind of designer baby side of things. But even that, only works with stem cells. So when it comes to the COVID vaccine, I've not reversed my position on it. I still would prefer to take the normal one, which is quote unquote only 75% effective. But there's that. I don't know the other stuff. I would just do that, but I'm going to wait a while. Obviously, I'm in the lowest risk category, so if there are any really dodgy effects, I'm not going to see them. So I'm in a kind of beneficial position there anyway. I see all the normie types celebrating. They've got it into the care homes. They've vaccinated 2.5 million people this week or something, or over the course of the last 2 weeks. So, and people are just relieved to have something which they consider to be an escape from this. Especially the vulnerable people, with we're talking care home residents and vulnerable people here, genuinely vulnerable people, not the vast majority of people. And that's nice to see. That's nice to see. And I do not think that there is an overarching larger plot with this vaccine to exploit the situation to cull the elderly, for instance. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I just, when it comes to sort of generally sort of the anti-vaxxer thing, there is always this kind of question underlying it, as in, why on earth would anybody do the things that these people imagine might be possible? Um, you know, Somehow there always seems to be this impression that the whole thing is being driven by some sort of Bond villain, you know. And I'm sorry, but that's not really how people
I
work.
I see people exploiting the situation for their own gain to push particular pieces of policy, etc. But I don't see like an overarching grand narrative of kind of destroy this, that, and the other, or I mean, there's the Great Reset stuff, right? But again, that is a name for something which has been in the works for years and years and years. It's been a conference that's been held at Davos for years and years and years and years, and they have are just as insane. The fact that they have more influence now is a consequence of the response to this coronavirus, and it's something we need to be vigilant against. But I don't
I
think that
mean,
they are, for instance, utilizing the vaccine to cull off
yes,
their opposition. It's just
yeah,
not.
precisely.
It's just
It's
not a
what
thing.
they are doing is they are trying to wedge the narrative of global warming and the narrative of the the whole COVID crisis. That they're trying to sort of merge that together into one. Um, but as such, yes, that there isn't really some kind of grand plan of somehow gaining control of this, that, or whatever. Um, but yes, it is sort of strange how many leaders seem to be wearing the right brooch and going into groupthink territory of all using the same jargon at the same time. You do sometimes, you are somewhat taken aback at times when you see that. How it could be possible that suddenly within 2 or 3 months everybody is using the term "build back better."
I hate that.
Just
I hate it. It's so corporate as well. I hate the sloganeering. Um, right. It's almost 10:30. I think we're going to probably round things out here. So I'm going to go through the last couple of super chats, and we'll respond to those and move on. I hope you've got the YouTube page open, Britisher, because you, as the thickisher, are coming up every now and again now on screen. But yes, Jedi Knight Anakin Cringe Walker says Governor Cuomo of New York has announced that they can't sustain. Oh, excuse me, sorry. They can't sustain the lockdown and will be forced to open and face the consequences. Literally Trump's talking point. Laugh my ass off. And I just go, yeah. It's unsurprising.
to be honest, that to me just sounds like a bid for monetary
Yeah,
support.
more funding. Especially the Democrats are now in power. Apply for funding. Apply for funding. Oh, we really would like to extend the lockdown, President Biden, but we can't under the current financial. More money. Yes, public money. There we go. So yes, I agree with you there, Richard. That's what that seems like to me. And finally, EC90 says, "Do you know about what the swine flu vaccine did?" Yes, my ex-girlfriend uh, Sarah has narcolepsy, so it was that was what that one caused in a lot of kids. So there was some compensation for that. The biggest issue with that actually has been that the medication is so expensive and difficult to obtain on the NHS, and the EU regulations have basically enforced the monopoly on that particular one. So that's very frustrating. But yes, I'm not saying that there are not dangers associated with particularly novel vaccines. What I'm saying is that this particular one, it seems to have been, is based on something which has been in development for a lot longer than 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 the start of the pandemic. So there's been a lot more testing, especially with other coronaviruses as well. And one would hope that they have taken on the lessons with the swine flu vaccine as well, and hopefully try to prevent it. Obviously, it's not saying that something can't happen, but that scientists will have been working on this and trying not to do it. At the end of the day, As long as it stays an optional thing as to whether or not you get it, then I'm happy with that. You know, just don't want to see mandatory vaccinations. But yes, I don't think there's necessarily going to be. I think the risk is relatively low. There we go. That's what I want to say in terms of risk reward and that sort of thing. So there we are. Um, and with that, it is time to end. Thank you very much for joining us, everyone in the audience. But also thank you to the Britisher for joining me for 2 hours of catch up and chill and talk nonsense and also talk politics.
Well, I mean,
As
it was
usual.
it was a lot of hard work because it was just trying to stretch this out into 2 hours when there was nothing to talk about because in the last 3 weeks nothing happened.
So yes, obviously, nothing has happened whatsoever. I hope you enjoyed this 2 hours on nothing, nothing at all, and we'll hopefully, if all goes to plan and we're back to normal scheduling, we will see you all next week, next Monday, same time, 8:30 GMT, whatever that happens to be for you. It's been an absolute pleasure. Uh, Good night. Take care. Have a lovely week.
Toodle pip.